Mr. Weir, since you're the oldest guy up there, why don't we let you go first and tell us, Mr. Weir, where are we headed?
Tim, since you did that to me, first I'm glad to start, but only if you allow me to remind people that we've had this discussion, because you're much older than I
am. You're lying because your lips are moving, right? Go ahead.
I don't think so. Well, there really, I'll elaborate on any of these things Tim and others want to talk about, but as I thought through where are we going, there are three quotes that came to mind. One of them, I realized there's an awful lot of finger-pointing, bloodletting, blaming Comey, doing this, looking at the Democratic National Committee and its involvement, blah, 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 blah. And I'm kind of mindful of a quote out of Julius Caesar, where Cassius looks at Brutus and says, "Fault, dear Brutus, lies not in our stars, but in ourselves." And I think in terms of the future of the party, and I have some very broader thoughts of how the party continues to relate to the three constituencies that are most significant based on this election. College-educated women, millennials, and minorities, and how it failed in at least two of those three to adequately address this. We need to take a serious look at that issue, much as Reince Priebus did in 2013 with the Republicans. And of course, everything he suggested was promptly ignored, but it turned out okay for him in the long run. The second is a more recent quote by Wayne Gretzky, who is fond of saying, was known for saying, "Skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck is." As Democrats, I've been a person who has been somewhat concerned that we always keep skating to where the puck is. And we have done that a lot, and we did that to some degree in 2016, and I think we paid a price for it. The third was something Frank Kelly once said just after I was elected chair of the Michigan Democratic Party. It was 1983. First Jefferson Jackson Day dinner. I'm in charge of 2,100 people, cheering crowd. I mean, I felt really good, I'll tell you. Frank got up and his first comment was, "Rick, enjoy this moment. It's all going to be downhill from here." To those who are totally disheartened about the next 4 years, I would make the observation, the prediction today. I believe 2018, based on historical trends, is going to be a banner year for Democrats. Yes. One need only look at 1966, 2010, the flip side of that. To those who want to make policy changes, who now have control, your window may be more narrow than you think, and of course we already know the problems are going to be greater than you expect. That's my starting.
That's good. That's good. Matt, please.
So we've been talking a lot about the individual candidates and their strategies, and I like to do that as much as the next person, but we just had a very national partisan election. 90% of each party voted for their own candidate. The most conservative parts of the Democratic and Independent pieces of the electorate went to the Republican Party, the out party, which is a normal trend after 2 consecutive terms of one party. And we had an election where the candidate that was less liked and had higher unfavorables and that lots of people said was unqualified or didn't have the temperament to be president still won. So we had an election in which the Hillary Clinton campaign bet the farm on the idea that normal Republican voters would be averse to Trump on the basis of personal characteristics, and that turned out to be wrong. They came home to the Republican Party. So I don't think we should learn necessarily that the individual candidate characteristics and that made the difference in all of the election, because we ended up having a very national partisan election. The Senate and presidential votes had a higher correlation than we've ever seen. The same will be true of U.S. House votes and presidential votes. The same will be true of state legislative votes and presidential votes. So we have a very polarized national party system, and one party just won and has been winning since Obama took office and was able to implement his policy program in the first couple of years. Where do we go from here? Certainly true that the Out party has the advantage in the first midterm election of the new president. But it gets a lot bigger the more that the new president is able to accomplish, the more that the new president moves in this case, moves the policy to the right. So the biggest losses were 1966, 94, and 2010, following big shifts left in national policy. So what we have to figure out is what's going to happen with Republicans, the National Republicans, becoming a governing party. Where they've just had to be against the Obama agenda, and now they have to see what they can accomplish. The bad news for them is the more that they are able to accomplish, the bigger the backlash.
Ms. Avery.
Well, I'd like to first point out that Rick Weiner is not related to the congressman from New York. Same last name.
But spelled different.
But spelled a little different.
Way different. The difference is huge.
It is pronounced. I'm just saying, everyone's always eloquent and I'm always the plain speaker. I also, like Frank Kelly did with you, I got a call from Mike Murphy after I was elected head of the Republican Party back in the day before there was electricity, and Bernie Klein was still going in between his fourth gig as a president of some major university. He said, well, congratulations, it's a reward and a punishment. And it was kind of sad. Richard McCall and I had actually had many conversations about this. Just to frame, what Darcy said to me was correct. I grew up in Macomb County, and I have worked just about my entire life in Detroit. And what I saw in Macomb County, I ran losing against David Wagner, but when he was in Congress, he fought NAFTA. He was a Democrat who fought NAFTA. And now this is very interesting how this is all kind of turned around to me now. Also, I have seen in Detroit anyway how it was run, that election was run. I didn't think that they had kind of went back to the old school way of doing things versus going into a lot of black media that I thought they should have, and how they could have done it. Macomb County just was on fire. I mean, they were on fire. They turned out Art Miller's son, who stepped away from the legislature to take that position, to be appointed to that position. It was a major sweep. So I look at some of the things that caused this, and I just cannot get over the fact that I heard a lot. I worked 2 county fairs, and just to hear what people were saying, I just wanted to hear. Some of us are just nerds when it comes to this stuff, but people were saying, you know, I got real worried in 2007, 2008, 2009 if I was going to lose my home or not. And they got out those goddamn things, and they never got me, they never gave me nothing. And that was a kind of a ringing thing that I thought if Hillary Clinton had just done something in terms of phrasing an economic message. I mean, the message together we're strengthened or whatever, it just didn't resonate, where at least, like they were saying, you understood what the other guy was saying. Now, where do we go from here? I would say on the Democratic Party side, they're going to take a big look at their leadership, like the Republican Party did at one point. They still want superdelegates to go over their people's primaries, so they want to do stuff. The Republican Party is going to start looking at this populist message. They're going to start looking at what does this really mean to have this control, and now we're going to govern, and now we better darn well do it. So I think it's going to be an interesting time. I think it's an interesting time for everyone. I think you're going to see major realignments in the African American community, and I also think that you're going to see a lot more activity within the Latino community, because I think that we've awakened a sleeping giant in that part, and I think that there's going to be a lot of serious efforts on both sides to try to see what those issues are. But to see them, you got to know them. You got to go there. You can't just, everybody said, oh, it doesn't make any difference how many people show up at Trump's rallies. Well, as Rick and I, and Matt knows too, the number one reason you vote for somebody is if you have met them. And if you go to and the second most important reason is if you know somebody who's met them. Well, when you go to a rally, you feel like you've met them. Or if a neighbor went, you feel like, well, they met them. It isn't a sign or a slogan or something. I mean, why did John Dingell, he could win anywhere in Michigan. He could come in Zealand because everybody knew him. I mean, he met a lot of people. So it's just a different view of a political thing about where we go from here, and I don't mean to be taken apart.
That's right, Ms. Avery, don't take the microphone away. Question. Is your party divided today?
I think it is somewhat divided. I think it is somewhat. And I think when you saw Ronna Romney McDaniel come out and say, I'm going to support Trump at the National Convention, and her uncle, who had been our previous presidential candidate, had just said, I'd never vote for that guy. I mean, you could see there is a schism. So there is going to be a schism, just like there's going to be in the Democratic Party. I mean, I have a stepdaughter who was so for Bernie Sanders. I mean, she would have gone to the ends of the earth, and she did vote for Hillary, but she didn't get any of her neighbors like she did when she voted for Bernie. So I think in both parties are going to have some bloodletting here.
So will Mr. Trump be able to bring the Bush family and the Romneys and people like that back into the party, or does he want to?
I don't know if he wants to. I think that just like in the Democratic Party, there's some elites things that are going on, and whether or not he wants to do it, I don't know whether or not he needs them to be effective anymore. Here in Michigan, we have term limits. It used to be if you knew Harry Bass, my God, and you just go in there and say, well, this is what we need in the budget, and do you understand this education? And he'd go, oh yeah, well, we just don't do that anymore. And so there's a lot of new people coming in D.C. as well as Michigan, which makes it not as reliant on these old coalitions that used to be out there.
Mr. Weiner, is the Democratic Party in Michigan divided?
I haven't stopped to think about it a lot, Tim, because I'm not involved in party politics to the same degree. I view more in terms of the question of what's needed to create a majority in the party electorally, which is different than the question on who's on first and who's on second, and who's in and who's out in terms of partisan politics. I will make a couple of observations that are relevant to that because it does affect inter-party politics. The again, as I made a point, the three groups, at least nationally, and to a lesser degree, that's probably true in Michigan, that Democrats need to build off from a base are minority voters that are college-educated women and millennials. I'm leaving something that's fairly obvious out. And that
Labor.
Wait, some part of labor, right? And here's why I say this. And again, you've known me for more years, because you're much older than me, than I think either of us want to admit to. So you know that there is probably no person who's not a union member who is more pro-labor than I am. And I think I can. Having said that, we've got to look at the demographics on this. I haven't seen any post-polling, but somebody told me 50% of labor went for Trump. And that's, to me, not just a frightening figure, because a misleading figure. Whatever that number is, once you take off the African Americans who are union members, once you take out the Hispanics who are union members, once you take out the public employees who are union members, and factor back to what you and I would think of as traditionally private sector manufacturing unions, that number has got to be materially lower. I don't know what that number is. but it is not huge, okay? And I think we as Democrats certainly can't abandon that. In fact, we didn't have a compelling economic message in 2016. That's pretty clear. But I think we also have to understand that even if we do have a compelling economic message as affects that grouping of people, it's not enough anymore unless we do the other three things.
Matt, what's your take on the status of the Republican Party nationally? And if you want to take a shot at Michigan as well, go ahead, please.
Well, certainly there's a big elite mass divide in the Republican Party. We surveyed political insiders in Lansing and found out almost none of them had supported Trump in the primaries. There were a lot of Kasich voters that said they were going to support Hillary. There was no excitement and no expectation that Trump would win, even in Republican insider circles. So that's why a lot of people inside thought there'd be more Republican crossover the Democratic side than vice versa. It mirrors a national picture where the Republican Party is really held together by broad symbolic principles and general conservative identification rather than issue positions that match the policy strategies of their elites in Congress and in the legislature. So Republicans don't have a majority when it comes to all of the policy issue positions that they want to put forward, but they do have a majority when it comes to those broad, symbolic, somewhat vague ideas about the direction of the country, the size and scope of government, etc. So they have to stay on that sort of broad messaging in order to keep that majority, whereas for Democrats, they have to cobble together all of these different groups with their own specific special interests in order to get to a majority. And that's a hard task as well.
Where did the less educated voter, blue-collar voter, go this time?
Well, clearly there was a big shift, especially in the North, to the Republican side. There's a general pattern that the more educated you are, the more partisan you are, and the more affected by partisanship you are. So it could be that in retrospect it was a bad strategy for Hillary Clinton to think that she would bring over those wavering educated Republicans who went home, and a little bit better strategy for Donald Trump to try to go for the Democratic-leaning, less educated voters. But the bad news for the Democrats is whether this mirrors a trend that we saw in the South for 30 years, where this same white working class constituency slowly moved permanently to the Republican side. If the same thing that happened in the South happens now in the North to the same constituency, that is a permanent minority status nationwide.
That's a provocative statement. Mr. Weiner, react to it.
It's a provocative statement. I'm not sure how to react to it. Again, I go back to my initial point: is you've got three building blocks, not only three building blocks of the party. None of them, in and of themselves, necessarily get you all the way out. Without a compelling economic message, you lose elections on a whole bunch of fronts. You don't necessarily lose just blue-collar, working-class people. Obviously, the wrong economic message, as I think we had to some degree in 2016, also affects our ability to attract millennials in the long term.
Right. Ms. Baker, what's going on in Macomb County?
Very interesting place. In terms of what happened even down the ballot, not just the top of the ballot, but down the ballot. They had a lot of, we were talking about it, Rick and I were, because we pay attention to that county, because at one time it was a bellwether county. So now are the Reagan Democrats, the Trump Republicans. Has that switched? We've had a lot of national people come in. Candace Miller just took away that whole thing from a guy who had been there for quite a long time. Obviously there was a lot of things going on in that race, but Hackle is very interesting to me, because Hackle, my father and Hackle's father were very good friends. I've known Hackle since he was a little kid. I've known Candace for ages, and my dad was a mayor of Mount Clemens for many years, but Hackle is very interesting because Hackle crosses the line over there. Hackle has endorsed Republicans, and he has endorsed Democrats. I mean, he has worked very closely with Mike Duggan, but he has worked very closely to help get Candace elected in that seat. And so I think we're seeing a more of a blurring of the lines than we used to out in Macomb, and a lot of it has to do with their leadership. They threw out a lot of what we would call people who have been there a long, long time. Maybe they shouldn't have been there a long, long time, but and now you're seeing a lot of federal corruption people coming in and doing those kinds of stuff. But I do think that they are kind of sick of everything. They're just sick of it, and they just want to see a change. And she just never got, Hillary never got a message across over there that I can help you with this stuff. And you know, it just didn't resonate. It was more of a let's just get the voters out. You know, this is a get out the vote effort. Well, you've got to have a message before you get the people out.
How much of it in Macomb County was she is female?
Oh yeah, well that, I mean, because Candace has been around for forever, and I mean, we're kind of the same. I mean, we're kind of like, Macomb County women are kind of like taking prisoners. We're kind of tough broads, you know, whenever you see us, but she did extremely well. If you look at her totals, how she has always done very well. But she started out, and her mentor, her sponsor was Ted Wabi, who was a Democrat. And so that's why that county is so interesting to look at for the media and for pollsters and different things like that. Also, what we haven't brought up is Donald Trump had a huge effort going on in San Antonio, Texas. He had over 100 people working data down there. Bloomberg, Chris Russell magazine, did a huge piece on it about how he manipulated data, taking the Obama, starting with the Obama thing about, remember how when if you went to a thing from Obama, they want your email message and then, you know, your rally, and then they built that, but then they combined it with the RNC, people that they had already, and then they did social media from that, and they just grew lists and did things like this. It was an amazing thing that Republicans used to have a big thing. Now, then Democrats during Obama had a big thing. Obama owns a list, and Trump's going to own this list. But that is going to be the change in the polls. How we poll.
And my apologies, this is off topic, but I need to ask you, Hackle run for governor, yea or nay?
Oh, will he run for governor?
Yeah.
I think he probably will.
And Ms. Miller, will she run for governor?
I think she probably will. I think
Good one, Rick.
I'm going to say that they're very close. And if one or the other runs, there has been a deal cut.
There has been.
That's the way they do things in Macomb County. I mean, in Macomb County, if you look at the judges, nobody runs against the judges in Macomb County. They are all unopposed. Everybody cuts deals in Macomb County. So and she and Hackle are very close. They've always been very close. Their families have been very close. She's a big sailor, you know, and his father was a sheriff. And our fathers, by the way, were Hackles and mine were both rascals. I can say that publicly, but it's a different kind of way that they get things done over there. Now remember, I was Wayne County Commissioner, so I saw how Wayne County worked. It's nothing like the way Macomb County works. Macomb County, you don't like your man, never wound your enemy. You kill him. You get rid of him. And that's how they do it. I mean, not literally.
So,
I'm sorry, I should say this so much better.
So what you
Sorry,
said
Bernie.
is both of them will not run, one or the other will run, but they both will not. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying that maybe they'll cut a deal. Maybe they'll be on the same ticket.
Oh, yeah, here's one. Okay, Chris.
How does this presidential election change the forecast or dynamics of the gubernatorial race?
Well, the party out of the presidency has won the last 17 out of 21 gubernatorial elections in Michigan, and the misses were by very small margins and were not associated with gains in the state legislature. So we have a very long-running historical pattern where the out party does much better in the gubernatorial election.
Well, I should refine that question. Among the Democrats, how does it change the dynamics within the Democratic field?
Rick's not going to touch that.
I haven't thought about it.
Good, now you can.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that I can think about, I'm not sure at my advanced age, I'm much older than Tim,
Wait, are we beating this dead?
that I can work with enough facility to answer that question. I really haven't given any thought, and I don't know, and I don't necessarily think it does, at least my cursory 30-second chance to react, changes anything other than the observation that I made already. I think this is going to be a huge year for Democrats nationally in 2018, tempered by the districting plans that are in place in many states that we're all living at both the congressional and the legislative level. And I think there is at least the potential, if the president missteps, that may be compounded by the fact that his popularity could be perhaps in the mid-20s.
All right, we're going to wind this down. Questions from the audience. Yes, please. Do you mind just stand and talk loud? Okay. There you go.
I'm not a public speaker, so.
Yes, you are.
Well, I am now.
Yes, you is.
I don't know how to say this exactly, but my background's in management. It's not politics, my husband's in politics, but this whole election I found fascinating for a couple different reasons. One, as a manager, management 101, you're asked, what is the job of everybody? What's the purpose? What's the goal? Etc. To me, the jobs of the parties are to support the party. The job is the president, represent us. What is the job of the voters? The job of the voters is to tell the president or to hire the president. So, what this election I thought was horrible is the language in it. And my thinking is this hoping people to become more racist, bullying is horrible, I think. And for me, I would like a letter from the voters, whether it says we the people, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, everybody, do not want this language.
But didn't this election validate that some people did?
Yeah, but who's really at fault? To me, it's the voters and the media.
All right, let's have the panel response. Excellent
We
question.
have the parties for that.
Okay, somebody want to take that? Go ahead.
Well, just to temper it a little bit, we didn't see a lot of increases in negative racial attitudes toward African Americans or Latinos. What we saw is concentration of those attitudes within Republican Party voters under the Obama administration. So in 2007, there was actually no difference in the percentage of people who rated whites higher than African Americans or Latinos between the two political parties. But under Barack Obama, those racial attitudes moved some voters toward the Republican Party. And so we got to a point where it became a more of a cross-cutting issue. Very surprising or less cross-cutting issue. Very surprising that racial attitudes could matter more in a presidential election following two with an African-American candidate on the ballot than those two elections. But that's what happened, and in part it's due to the sorting of people into the parties based on racial attitudes.
So it would be fair to say that this was a chance for the people that didn't like him being elected president to get even.
There was some of that, but there were a lot of people who voted twice for Barack Obama and switched to Trump this time. And that doesn't mean racial attitudes didn't play a role in their decision making. They very well could have. There was just not a countervailing economic or partisan reason to vote for the Democrats.
Matt, here's what I'm sorry, it's a bit, even assuming that there isn't a significantly larger, I'm losing my voice, a significantly larger number of people, of those who harbor negative racial, ethnic, religious attitudes. I think it is a fair comment that as a result of the rhetoric in this campaign, those that do, whether there are more of them or the same amount, have found it more acceptable socially to verbalize them. I think that is that is in dispute. This is a conversation which I've had. I teach an election law class at MSU, and occasionally, because this is an election year, politics crops into those conversations in class. We don't just necessarily sit there and analyze each case, and I think it is. And as we approach the post-election period, the burden, I think, is appropriately on those who put those forces in place, who are other, who are voters I disagree with, but who are otherwise decent human beings, to use their best efforts to put the toothpaste back into the tube.
The genie is out of the bottle, Mr. Weir.
Well, the question is, in most animated films, the genie winds up going back in at some point in time. So the question is, what, if anything, gets it in? My point is not what, but whose burden, if I can use the word burden advising, whose responsibility is to put the genie back in the bottle?
All right, Richard.
I'd be interested in your reaction to what I saw in this election, which was sort of a content-free election. There are no issues. I'm old enough to remember when we would fight over labor union issues, consumer protection issues, foreign affairs, level of defense spending, welfare, all kinds. These were issues that got argued about in the campaigns. And now, and Rick, when you mentioned the Democratic Party, it's all about which group you can cluster together to achieve your electoral objectives. And I'm wondering if you sense that there's just much less attention to issues and much more attention. Maybe it's these computers and pollsters and micro-targeting and all that nobody gives a damn about issues. But it's sort of, as a policy wall, frustrating that you don't have any conversation.
And let's add the media to that equation. Can I get an amen? Yes. Go
No,
ahead.
I would just, before Rick answers, I was just going to tell you a little story about my daughter who lives in North Carolina. My daughter got a mailer in North Carolina that said the Democratic Party and the Sierra Club are going to publish in the newspaper a list of you and your neighbors and if you have voted or not. And this was the Republican Party mailer that came to her. And it said, so we are going to show you what you and your neighbors, if you, now they don't have who you voted for, but they had my daughter's name, and then they had 3 more of her neighbors, and they had, my daughter of course has voted in every election, and they had a neighbor, well, one had voted in one, hadn't voted in This was an amazing targeted piece. I mean, somebody had to sit there and actually put that out. They had to not only figure out if my daughter had voted by just her name being on the rolls, but they had to go look up in the archives of who owns the houses around her and then look up their voting record. Now this is what we're talking about. Why aren't we talking about, I mean, she got this and she said, I know these people, my God, they never voted. I mean, it's like, and it was like an incredible, it was obviously to get her to go out to vote. I mean, it was a get out the vote piece rather than doing robocalls or something. But that's how far we have gotten away from the issue. And nothing about taxes in her neighborhood or who's the mayor or whether or not, all the abortion stuff. We used to have all these big kind of things. And I think social media has done a lot to do with that, and the fact that if you read any reporters anymore, they have to be on Twitter, they have to be on Facebook, they have to do all these things. There's like no time to think. And so for contemplation of issues, because it's always so fast, and I think sometimes we get into that ourselves. That's a total civilian look at it.
Richard, you and I are very much like Adjusted for Party. We are total junkies on this stuff. We love the minutiae of issues. I do, and you do. The problem is this. Our statement that issues aren't being talked about is dead wrong. Wrong according to who? 90% of the people who are evaluating the information that they're getting. to them, issues are being talked about in ways that are meaningful to them, whether I like it or not, and I don't. Drain the swamp is a basket of issues to them. Whether I like it or not, the Clinton campaign at least felt that Stronger Together was a basket, at least epitomized a basket of issues in there. I mean, I agree with the selection of the slogan, in fact I don't, but the bottom line of it is that they are issues and they're being defined by people other than you and I, who I think could arguably be referred to pejoratively as the elites.
Last question, please.
Well, that just leads into what I'm going to say, and that is that when those crowds, those Trump crowds, yelled, "Lock her up, lock her up," to me, it was a huge basket of issues, and it meant lock all the hers up, send them back to the kitchen. They, meaning not just women, but others too, took our jobs. They now, 40% of married women make more than their husbands if they're both working. They now make more than I do. I was raised to believe I would be the alpha male in my family and in my job, in my community. Lock her up. I think that what Trump represents really is a rebellion against the changing sex roles, combined with a rebellion of having a black leader, smart, policy wonk, capable, and they resent it. And these white males who kind of changed this election those were those basket of issues, race and gender role issues. I heard lock her up as being anti-feminist, anti-women, pro-male control. That's what I heard, and that's a huge bunch of issues. Lock her up. Not just because of Hillary's emails. It was all women everywhere. And that's why I had a hard time understanding, and maybe you got some insight, how could any woman vote for that man when his crowds wanted to lock Hillary up?
Because she never articulated every ad that she had was against Trump, just like you were saying. Every ad was against Trump. She had to, and this is only my opinion, she had to defend an economic message for not just that. I mean, that's good that you think that, and a lot of people do think that, but I'm saying that she had to articulate what her vision was, not just what she thought his vision was. And when you get to that point, that's when you decide, the independents start deciding an election. She did good at the last week, I think it was 11 days when she started doing the new ads. It was too late. You know, absentee ballot in the early voting states is incredible. I mean, you got to start. Or I used to tell newspapers, "Oh boy, it's really nice you're coming out a month before, the election and endorsing." Well, that doesn't mean anything. We've already had 40% of the people vote already. But so you have to. You can be against someone and you can be very vehement about it, but your candidate has got to articulate what they stand for.
Just,
Yeah, go ahead.
just two pieces of context. The part of the issue discussion that's lacking is because we're more sorted across policy issues now than we ever have been. So there aren't as many cross-cutting issues where you have Democrats that you can attract with a normally Republican issue position or vice versa. The other long-running difference is that the people are generally conservative, but they're specifically liberal. They have liberal policy positions, but they still think of themselves as conservatives and agree with the Republican Party in principled terms. So it's always to the advantage of Republicans to speak in these broader symbolic language. Even on immigration, the exit polls showed people were for a path to citizenship. They were not for deportation. So when it gets to specific policy issues, you don't get that broad support. But when you stick at the level of our country is changing too fast, there's too much social change, then you get a much broader set of support.
Mr. Weeder.
Two very brief observations. One of the reasons for that, as most of you are aware, the Clinton campaign bought very little by way of ads in this state, at least until the end. Most of them were bought by third-party committees. That obviously impacted the content. Having said that, and I don't need to bring up painful memories for those of us who were around in 1990, or joyous ones for some who were there in 1990. But this reminded me so much of the post-mortem in Governor Blanchard's campaign to the 1990 campaign. Where was the reason to vote for? And I suspect the failure of the Clinton campaign to buy much time in Michigan, and for that matter, in Wisconsin. And the use of third-party ads just kind of dovetailed in a very bad way.
All right, this is the last question.
Okay. So, this is for everybody here, because I run for office and I have an accent. And I want to tell all of you, Republican and Democrat, that every foreigner that you see, whether it's Latino or, I don't consider myself Latino, and Chicana or Hispanic girls, I'm from South America, period. What neither party has understood is that the Latinos or the Hispanics, we call us, have stayed and have come by the thousands to Michigan and all states. They're educated, they went to our universities, they believe in immigration reform, they believe in the wall, they believe in many of the things that Trump was saying, because we pay taxes, because we work, because we think the same way that the rest of the world. And so you guys have seen the same 5 families in Michigan that are Hispanic, and you use them politically, but you don't realize that you're surrounded by foreigners that have them here and think entirely different, and that we don't think any different than Trump. That some of the social programs and I'm a Democrat, that we throw around, we work very hard. We all started with some issues and the American dream. And so for us, as Latinos or whatever, or Europeans, Middle Easterners, it's offensive that you have a group that you have used for years politically, and you don't notice that there's a tremendous amount of immigration, legal immigration, that is against illegal immigration and all of the things that you try to push down our throats. That's what I wanted to say.
Any final words from the panel?
I don't have any.
Boy, that's unusual. Go ahead.
I don't know, I
That's
think-
a first. Stop the press. We have it
No,
organized.
this is amazing. I just want to say this, I think this is a great opportunity for both parties to take a look at what's happened here, and if there's going to be realignment and what's going to happen, and I think it's going to be probably the best time for people like Mr. Skubik and his off the record and different things on the reporting, because he's got there for the next couple of years. There's going to be a lot to report about, and it's not going to be a gamut courser.
Thank you. Matt, any final
Let's
words?
go.
Matt, 30 seconds.
Just there's a lot to watch in the next few months. If this was the Hillary transition, we wouldn't really care very much about the cabinet secretaries or the policy agenda for the first 100 days, but this is a rare time when we just don't know what the administration is going to look like, or what they're going to try to pursue, or how connected they're going to be to the Republicans in Congress. So it doesn't stop getting exciting now. It's just starting.
Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for our great panel.
Carrie Ebersol and the Michigan Political History Society, and with Steve and myself. Thank you to our moderator, to our great panelists today. And also want to acknowledge Richard McClellan, who did an outstanding job last night with the Michigan Political Leadership Program Fellows. And just to give us all comfort, we have 24 people today who left committed to working together to solve critically important problems. But in the meantime, let's go outside and enjoy some refreshments in each other's company and get on with the evening. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to our sponsors.